Not few political constellations are marking today the old Europe. Germany and France have allied strategically, talking about a recomposition, without other partners agreeing too much because of problems of this binomial. For example, Italy. First Minister Giuseppe Conte declared by the end of January, "We will not stay silent signing decisions made by others." Meanwhile, the same actor, China, sees a solution to its recession, and this causes doubts in the other members, even if there were the Chinese president met with other important European leaders. The House of Commons decided a few hours ago to take negotiations in its hands, and migrations are an unstoppable phenomenon. And we have to look at it as a result of wars where several members of the European Union are stained with blood. What is guiding European Union? Why don't they talk about a recomposition? Is this an outdated model? What about the relation with other actors like the United States, China, Russia, Middle East, and Latin America, and the Caribbean? European Union internal policies and problems. This is our critical move today. We will start in a minute. Let's talk about recent facts. One in particular, subject of critical move that is marking this date, the recent visit of Chinese president to Italy to include Italy to the powerful Silk Route. 50 years after the Treaty of 1963, last January 22, German premier and French president met in Aquisgrán near the border of Netherlands and Belgium and signed another treaty in the presence of the presidents of the Commission. The document has allegedly completed the one in 1963 with Adenauer and Charles de Gaulle, and it sets the basis for border relations, the creation of a binational assembly with 100 members, and they talk about working with Germany inside the Security Council of the United Nations, and this treaty that is called the Treaty of Aquisgrán is talking about a European army. There's another news, Angela Merkel and Macron that met some hours ago with Chinese president. And this meeting was used to prepare the European Union Brussels summit for April 9. This is an important fact. There's another decisive fact at the time, which is Brexit. We want to review its status and possible immediate geopolitical impact. Brexit. This word was used to refer to the referendum where the British voted to leave the European Union. This was a promise of David Cameron after his election as the First Minister of the UK. After the defeat of No, Cameron resignated. The illusion of the British government to stop the migration crisis, the people being fed up of the blocks of political policies and conflicts that are not theirs, made them leave European Union. To separate the UK talked about Article 50 of the bloc that allows a member to leave. The 27 remaining countries had to discuss the withdrawal. The direct consequences for the UK is to lose tariff benefits for Europe and the loss of the capacity as member. Regarding the geopolitical impact, the European Union will stop receiving the economic collaboration from the UK. The fears that the domino effect take place in other countries abandon the European Commission. 4 countries have unfavorable decisions: Spain, Greece, France, and UK. Regarding the relation with other countries, the European Union has advanced negotiations with China, and the UK is its main promoter. The Brexit is expected to end by the end of this year. What is interesting in this critical move? Take an X-ray of the European Union, its model, its contradictions, consensus, and what some call the nationalist tsunami and decisive moves in the political move today. We will go to our correspondent Edu Marin from Spain, Madrid. 62 years after the creation of what today is known as the European Union, the balance depends who you ask, if it's positive and negative. If you ask European authorities and those who are convinced of this union of 28 countries, the balance is positive, especially after the introduction of the euro in 1999 for financial markets and 3 years later for the pockets of European people. The main economic integration, according to those who are convinced, is a better community for Europeans that do not have to change currencies among countries and are not conditioned by the exchange rates of what happened before in the Eurozone. And therefore there is no risk in this aspect. Nevertheless, the critiques with this economic integration say that this has created more inequality between rich and poor. There's more privilege for the big companies and the rich, and the poorer classes have impoverished, especially through the introduction of the single currency. And this is why they are asking budgets and more political integration and not economic integration only. The discussion at present is focused on the UK. 3 days before the expiration of the term, although an extension is expected by June, although Italy, based on the North League and the Cinque Stelle movement, both agree on the Euroscepticism and the German position that earned weight in the European Union, and that is now approaching Russia by connecting gas directly from Russia to Germany through the Baltic Sea. There's also, it seems that the integration of Turkey to the European Union seems to be in standby. The European authorities are fearful with human rights, according to what the authorities have declared. The great threats to the European Union arrive by the extreme right nationalisms that are growing in Europe, and this is also a fear of the former Eastern European and the weight they have in the European Union and the politics of these extreme right governments that are taking power in many countries of the European Union. They fear that migration. Therefore, we can say that European Union today seems to be in crisis. We will see how these months go before European elections on May 26 and what happens later. Interesting your panorama. Thank you for informing us. Let's look at how things are in-house. Contradictions, consensus, differences. We will study this after this pause. We are back. We will now review European Union internal differences and geopolitical divergences. Let's go to the construction of the community bloc. European Union, a political community established for the integration and common governance. It is composed by 28 countries and was established with the European Union Treaty on November 1st, 1993. Members are Germany, Belgium, France, Luxembourg, Netherlands, and Italy as founders on March 25, 1957. Then Denmark, UK, and Ireland. Greece, Spain, Portugal, Sweden, Austria, and Finland. Cyprus, Malta, Slovakia, Slovenia, Hungary, Estonia, Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, and Czech Republic came later. The most recent incorporation is Romania and Bulgaria and Croatia. It has its own institutions and rules. Germany, France, Italy, and UK have more seats in the parliament. Euro is the official currency in 19 of 18 countries, and more than 64% of the total trade is affected between members. Our purpose for this first segment is to see how things are in-house, with contradictions and differences inside the bloc. Germany and France, the most dynamic nations inside the organization, have asymmetrical relations with other countries, mainly regarding economic benefits of euro. This is reported by Italy since Giuseppe Conte came to office and has led Italy's separating a little and approaching to China. The group of most industrialized countries of the planet added its relations to China. In response, Germany and France announced a meeting between both countries and the president of the European Commission with the Chinese president. Even if the meeting seems like a meeting between the bloc and China, it is actually a demonstration of force of Germany and France separately. On the other hand, the UK's Brexit without agreement with Europe could have serious consequences. The UK should leave under the conditions imposed by the bloc. European elections are decisive in this situation. Brussels wants a separation before elections in May. And another difference inside the European Union is the difference regarding migrations that were exposed in June in 2018 and last year. Hungary, Poland, Slovakia, and Czech Republic agree to be hostile to migrants. The most hostile country is Hungary, that has refused to have organization of migrants in its country. Well, of course, there are several forces, and we will deepen now, connecting from Spain with Ruth Ferrero, political science professor of Complutense University of Madrid. She is co-director of the study group Europe and Eurasia. and several other subjects. She studies the matters related with world geopolitics. Welcome, Ruth. We have you on the phone. It's very valuable for us. How do you see the European Union at this time, according to the context we just listened? It seems that there are more differences than consensus. Do you agree? Do you think that the exhaustion of the relation among equals, which was the original statement for the European Union, continue? Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me. I'm sorry we can't have a video because of technical matters, but I think that one of the great virtues of the European Union, which also has many defects, is that it has placed the interests of the majority above what many thought was ended, that is the European integration process. It is true that there are several Europes. There is the South, Europe North, East, and West. But it is true that until now we have achieved a series of common values where we all agree. I think that in the last times there have been discrepancies on certain policies, but I truly believe that these can be overcome. The European Constitution has been made thanks to crises that have been overcome, and progress has been made each time. We hope that the Euro crisis as of 2008, with the global economic crisis, the humanitarian migration crisis in 2015, the Ukrainian crisis in 2014-15, and more recently, since 2016, Brexit, are different crises that the Union has confronted, and many of the matters that are being discussed as a crisis in the Union are basically related with state competences. It's not at supranational level. Something is to see where those competences lie, and another thing is that if it goes above the national, it relates to a single market. We have to see where they are at this time. What we have to have clear is that we must negotiate, sit and negotiate, and reach an agreement between the different governments and member states. In your report, you mentioned the group of Belgrade. It's true that it's a homogeneous group in which there are also differences regardless of the policies we're talking about. So it's not the same to talk about Hungary or Czech Republic and Poland and Slovakia. These are geographically close contexts, but that have their specificities and, of course, do not have the same position in many sectorial policies. In the case, for example, the Czech Republic regarding European positions. Ruth, which of the bloc's countries is leading? Is it France and Germany that have allied strategical to form an axis and is also proposing to create a European axis? Does this axis propose a re-impulse or a French-German supremacy? I think that unity would not exist without France and Germany. It would be as simple as that. Both countries have been operating constantly throughout the existence of the European country. The proposal of the European army is being discussed in Juncker's presidency, but we will have to see how it comes out, because there are many matters that have not been discussed. If a European army is created, what would the European states in NATO do? Should they leave NATO? Would we have a defense army? Is it worth it to have our own army? We have to see what happens after the elections of May 20. That will be decisive to see where the European Union goes. The electoral results will tell us, among other things, the composition of the European Parliament with the parliamentary groups, who will be sitting there, who they will agree the different policies, and on the other hand, a new commissary group will be established, and the first time in history we will have people belonging to governments that we could call extreme right, or parties that are deeply skeptical. It's true, it doesn't seem that we will run the risk of new attempt of leaving the European Union, as the case of Brexit. The UK will leave, but I don't see any other alarm well-argued and measured alarm with another state of the Union. What I rather believe is that there's a group of countries, including Italy, Austria, and even Germany at a given time, that could, I'm sorry, not Germany, France, that could try to rebuild different Europe to what has been built throughout these years. I think it's important that we recover the idea on which the European Union was founded, its values, and we rethink if we want to continue with these values or we prefer to change them. But this is something that must be debated in the European Council. And where the most important will be what the citizens vote in May. Recovering those common values, what depends? The common values you were mentioning, do you think they will be recovered? Well, it is essential to see what the goal of having a European Union is. Our parents had it clear. It was to rebuild Europe through peace and through values that were based on human rights and the respect of the state of law, with certain expansions and important presence of skeptical parties, where the citizens have not understood the meaning of the union. You know, they thought that the union would have been the solution to their problems, and it has not been so. We see how this is reflected in different political options, which are not trying to rescue the idea to rebuild Europe through peace and economic growth, but they pretend to go back to the national sphere and try to solve their problems autonomously, and problems that in a neoliberal globalization system it's not possible. I think that we should try, among the 27 remaining countries, we should reach some common points to start building. In order to do this, we need another policy, and this is what we don't have in many times. Regarding parliamentary elections that are decisive and would seem they are before the Brexit divorce that we still don't know how and when will take place because of the rejection of the British Parliament and the agreement with Theresa May. You say that not too many alarms are on, but some authors and analysts, this is the case of Mexican Professor Alfredo Jalife, who says that a nationalistic tsunami could take place in this new elections challenge of the European Union. How do you see this? Well, surely we calculate that around 150 to 200 members of the Commission will be nationalistic and will be sitting for the first time in the European Parliament, but that would be 1/3. The thing is that how the other political parties are failing, that they are not able to bring their seats. It's not only the European institutions, but it's the national institutions that do not find solutions to the problems that are above national and they're will not be solved from the national point of view, and they're trying to blame and throwing the ball to European institutions. The European Union is not a state, and this is what we must start upon, and therefore it cannot fulfill some functions like, for example, redistribution of wealth. It is also true the European Union has not fulfilled its paradigm sustained on the neoliberal ideology by social democracy that is stepping back, conservative countries parties that, especially in the last years, are focused on national policy. And, of course, the citizens are trying to seek for new political forces that give simple answers to complex problems. Last week, there was much concern, and we saw it on the media with different declarations, because of the visit of President Xi Jinping to Italy, the first stop that would take him to France and Monaco. In Paris, he would meet with Macron, Juncker and Merkel. I asked the incorporation of Italy to the Silk Route is also showing some differences, or does this give us an idea that these economies need to diversify their sources and identify in China a reliable option? Or what is your opinion in this regard? One of the key matters is to understand that perhaps one of the main problems of the Union is that each state is looking at its own interests. There's a focus on the European Constitution. For you to have an idea, it's so evident that there has not been a delegation of sovereignties like those who accuse the European Union of that, is that the states continue negotiating in bilateral ways and establishing their own agreements regardless of the European Union. Therefore, those who have wanted to sell the people this idea against the European Union is not true, because the states continue working in bilateral agreements without need to resort to Europe. Once some commercial agreements are executed, the rest of the partners should agree, but at the beginning they don't need Europe in the commercial aspect, where they could have more restrictions because of the Union, but in general, in foreign policy, there is no type of limitation by the European Union regarding the country's member countries' foreign policies. Thank you very much, Ruth, for taking our questions. This was Ruth Ferrero, who connected from Madrid. And now I would like to connect with Arturo Gal, Mexican professor of law. He lives in Germany. Welcome, Arturo, to Critical Move. We have contacted you before, but this time I would like to ask you, how do you see the European Union at this time? We were telling Ruth that we have the impression that the European Union has more differences than consensus. Do you agree? Yes, I share the idea that at this time the European Union has reached a point where two blocks, visible blocks, are created. The traditional one with this Atlantis agreement with the United States, Australia, it's Japan, South Korea, etc. And the other block commanded until recently by President or Hungarian First Minister, and now Italy has replaced a little, and that is also Eurosceptical, as they are called, skeptical. One of the Italy is one of the largest economies of Europe, and it takes this step with more traditional nationalistic views. Some call him extreme right, and we should review well if this concept applies. But two poles have been created where Hungary, Poland, Austria, Italy, etc. are more akin to what Donald Trump proposes in the United States. And of course, since Donald Trump has clashed with traditional policies of European Union commanded by Angela Merkel and Macron, these countries have aligned a little more with the protectionist politics of a defaced capitalism. And these countries I mentioned have aligned to this, and this has made Europe lose the consensus it had before. And we saw this in the matter of Venezuela, where no agreement was reached, and they did not reach all the agreement to support self-proclaimed President Guaidó. So the countries, members of the European Union, have decided unilaterally to continue, like Holland or the Netherlands and Germany, that persisted on providing their support to self-proclaimed president. And this caused the German ambassador to be expelled from Venezuela. Now, who is guiding the community ship? I think there's an alliance that is clear between France and Germany. Traditionally, have guided the European Union with Germany prevailing over France. This policy of no tariffs, where they export their technology, machinery, without paying the products of the European periphery that are basically being exploited. And this is why we have seen that recurrent crisis in Spain, Portugal, Greece, that reached a point of collapse. And these countries that command the project, especially France, are also involved in social-economic trouble, and the extreme policies, or called clash policies, as they call them themselves, have had repercussions, especially in France, where the social protest has been freer than in Germany, because in Germany the unions are banned from protesting, And we saw the yellow vests in France that have caused problem to Macron's government. And I think this is a result of the implementation of ultra-neoliberal policies that are also reaching countries that traditionally did not have so strong problems. We listened to riots in Sweden, but I think that this project is being commanded by Germany and France that are the most who benefit from them, and the UK has been left aside. But and they have not decided about Brexit, and they are about to leave the Union. Some of what we will talk about in our next segment after the pause. We want to deepen. What about the relation of the community bloc outwards? Could the European Union end to approach China because of commercial and defensive interests and leave or stay away from the U.S. orbit that is so threatening through President Trump? This is a hypothesis, a question, and we will repeat it after we come back from this pause. We're back with Critical Move. We are talking about the European Union, and we are making an X-ray both of internal matters and outwards. There are also contradictions and differences in the relations between the European Union and other players of the world geopolitics, like the United States, that is pressing strongly on different sides. It asks the governments of the European Union to contribute more to the war. Germany, Russia, gas duct. Trump has said it many times, and it pretends the community bloc to leave from the Iran agreement. In this case, our agreement, says the European bloc, and he has even sought for mechanism to avoid the sanctions, U.S. sanctions against Iran, and see the possibility of continuing trading with Iran. The European Union supports U.S. military intervention and its repeated violation of the country's sovereignty. The great weapons producers, especially British and French, together with oil corporations, have similar interests in the Arab world. In other aspects, there are problems. In the commercial matters, President Trump has said more than once that the commercial balance favors Europe with 150 billion surplus. Nevertheless, this is denied by the European Union, that says that the difference between exports and imports favors U.S. in 14 billion. The United States is the main European exports market. Europe sent 20% of its production to the United States. Another dispute with the United States lies that this country tries to separate Russia from the European nations, especially the dependence on Russian gas that comes from Siberia and across the continent. The United States is trying to block the construction of the Nord Stream 2 gas duct that would be strategic for Russia. It is two gas pipings with a capacity of transporting 55 billion per year. Another meeting took place in Sharm el-Sheikh on February 24-25. According to international analysts, no great definitions were made beyond the finding. Both blocs reaffirm the position on the legality of Israeli settlements on Palestinian land. Other topics of the agenda were nuclear weapons and armed conflicts, migrations, and the situation in Syria. We continue analyzing and keep communication with Arturo Gal, a Mexican analyst, a resident in Germany. He is a professor. French president, according to the last hour news, talked about exemplary cooperation with China during his meeting in Paris, with the participation also of Angela Merkel. Jean-Claude Juncker also wears the ship leading with China. Italy last week allowed us to see the internal differences in this regard. Yes, I think that the European Union is applying the policy of not having a firm step once they have good relations and agreements. After the Second World War with the United States and the Atlantic Bloc, they are playing with new actors, contemporary actors like China, Russia, and post-communist Russia. And this is a consequence of the rise in the United States of a government that is not the Clinton and Obama, but that has protectionist views, nationalist capitalism, and this, together with Trump's personality and his way of doing politics and diplomacy, has made the European Union look at other sectors, but without leaving NATO, even if they are Trump is pressing for them to pay more money. I think that we must think about what will happen in the next 5-10 years with the election of the United States of Trump. If there is coming back to the traditional Obama policy or Clinton or Bush policy, I think the European Union will gradually return or stop pressing so strong with other allies and will remain in the bloc that has been more comfortable until now, which is NATO and the European Union, all these mechanisms created after the Second World War for the Cold War. The Russian Federation, Professor? The Russian Federation, of course, has its own interests, as a correspondent answered. The gas duct that is being built is essential to export gas to Europe. And certainly this causes fright to the United States because the European Union would stop purchasing a lot of the gas that it now purchases from the United States. And this dependence is not economic, and Europe would like not to depend on commercial relations as restrictive as they are with the United States, but the European Union is looking to gradually create a European army, and they are looking at more economic independence, but also an armed branch that will allow to export its political interests through the force. Above all, I think that in the Mediterranean region, where France has unilaterally acted in Mali, and that they also had great participation. In fact, I think it was a prevailing participation in the illegal and perverse war against Gaddafi in Libya. So I think, especially commanded by Merkel, I think steps are given to the rise of a new actor with military weight commanded by the European Union, besides the United States, that could have strength to impose its interest. I would say local interest in the north of Africa, in the Mediterranean region, and interests that will also be threatened with the installation of the missiles in the border with Poland, in the region of Kaliningrado, that allegedly are to defend the European Union, but the truth is that this is to limit the Russian atomic power. What about the case of Middle East? We see a common position or constant. The European makes the war, does not solve the forced migrations caused by the horror and chaos, but they depend on the oil and resources in this strategic region. There's a giant double standard system in the European Union. And the European Union loves to project, to have a reputation of the most advanced governments regarding social rights, etc., and this is outwards, much more than the United States, but actually the European foreign policy has been predator in the Middle East, especially in the region, in the Mediterranean region, in Libya, as I said, where France has had a significant role, and we now see in the region of Kurdistan, where Germany, since the first moment of the so-called civil war, that is rather an external aggression war, exported weapons to the Kurdish guerrilla and has many weapons agreement with Erdogan in Turkey. And it even sent military to form a Kurdish guerrilla with these weapons. We have also seen that Germany sells weapons to Israel in submarines with atomic capacity. So the European Union has a double standard in its foreign policy, and they have made business with the Middle East, conflicts in the Middle East, and they and after that they refuse to take over the refugees that they have created, and even if they accept it, they exploit them with cheap labor. I can tell you this firsthand because I also give German lessons to refugees here. And but these migrants are cheap labor that work with the private companies that benefit from the entrance of this migration. Those who make it, of course. So it's a round business for all of weapons exporters, private corporations with cheap labor, etc. Thank you very much, Professor.
Hasta pronto. Despedimos a nuestro último invitado, Arturo
This was our last guest, Arturo Gal, Mexican resident in Germany, expert on these topics. We will now go to our conclusions. Of course, we have, after discussing with our guests, that not necessarily agree on all the matters. While there is a series of common foundational values, there are also discrepancies. For some, as Professor Ruth, that are easily solvable, but for others, so decisive that could even risk the community alliance after so many years. Not all European actors are the same because of their internal realities that are diverse, even if we're talking about regions that are closed or nations that are closed. We have to wait until the UK separates, as well as parliamentary elections next May, where we should be attentive to nationalistic trends. At this time, the command is held by Germany and France, and they have to create a strategy that has not managed to resolve certain problems, egalitarian income, and the differences between North and South. Regarding the military defensive issues, this gives us important keys, and the double standards in their foreign policy is clear. We must also see if there's a turn in the relation with the United States, and see finally what happens to the relations between the European Union and China and Russia. This is the end of our critical move. Thank you very much for trusting us.
Siga conectado a Telesur como siempre.